Another issue, it's an issue in the UK, it's a disturbing issue. We've discussed it here on this show previously, and that's allegations of anti-Semitic behaviour that's been plaguing Britain's Labor Party for years now. And last night, the party's poor response to this reprehensible conduct came to a head with a very disappointing response. In a BBC interview, Labor leader Jeremy Corbyn was asked 4 times whether he would like to apologise to the UK's Jewish community, and he declined at every opportunity, notwithstanding serious allegations against 150 of his MPs and candidates over anti-Semitic remarks and conduct. After the interview, even members of Corbyn's own party called on him to apologise, with Labor's Shadow Defence Secretary Nia Griffith saying the party's handling of this issue, or non-handling as the case might be, she said is a shame on us. It's also prompted the UK's chief rabbi to enter the political fray, saying an overwhelming majority of Britain's Jews are gripped by anxiety about Corbyn's possible election as PM. Joining me now is Executive Director of the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council, Dr. Colin Rubenstein. Colin, this is, well, it's been going on for months and months and months inside the Labor Party. There's been talk that it's not as bad, and there's been discussion about how they mitigate the public perception. But it can't get more damning than that when you have the would-be putative Prime Minister sit there on a BBC interview and be offered 4 times a chance to correct the record and decline every time. Anti-Semitism, arguably, is at the heart of Labor today.
Yes, unfortunately, that's all too true. And the problem is that Jeremy Corbyn, after he assumed the leadership in 2015, has been party to what's now become regarded as institutionalised anti-Semitism within the British Labor Party. And that's why the Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis was quite correct in saying a poison has taken root in the party. And it's all to do with the failure to deal with this insidious hatred within the party. As you say, there are 150 cases, over 1,000 incidents of anti-Semitism within the party, not taken seriously, not being dealt with, to the point where the UK Equality and Human Rights Commission, the independent body on racism, has set up an inquiry to deal with anti-Semitism in the British Labor Party. It doesn't really get much worse than this. And of course Corbyn in general is a far-left Marxist, and he's sending tremors throughout British society and internationally in terms of what he would mean as a British Prime Minister, taking the country out of the Five Eyes, distancing Britain from the Western Alliance and Western values, in effect. He's a throwback from the 60s and the far left of the 60s. And the truth of the matter is that 87% of British Jewry regard him as an anti-Semite. 47% of them say they'd leave, consider leaving if he won the election. And really only 7% would even entertain the possibility of voting for him. And you have ructions within the party. You have resignations by high-level British politicians, even in the last week. Tom Watson, for example, and many others in the crossbenchers, becoming independents, refusing to serve with Corbyn. And the words he used in the introduction, that this being a shame on Britain, is all too true. So it's an extremely worrying situation. He's made it clear he's extremely anti-Israel, of course. There's hardly a terrorist group anti-Israel that he doesn't seem to like and regard as friends, be it Hamas or Hezbollah, and his role with Iran and so on. So the record is there for all to see, and the truth of the matter is he will not deal with it. And in fact, it's grown and festered under his so-called leadership. And until, of course, that leadership is something in the past, any chance of dealing with this insidious cancer within the party will be impossible to do so successfully.
There's been a range of Labor leaders like Ken Livingstone, former Mayor of London, who's tried to tackle him on this issue. They've not been able to effect change inside the Labor Party. Now, Livingstone's been suspended by the Labor Party. There's others, as I said before, the Shadow Defence Minister, she would be the Defence Minister if they were to win the election, has to come out there and say this is a shame on the Labor Party. There are Labor members leaving in droves. Yet this guy is still the would-be Prime Minister of Britain. Now, the Jewish community in Britain, Jewish leaders have gone to extraordinary lengths. There's been front pages of papers over there saying a vote for Labor is a vote for anti-Semitism. People are speaking out. It's not just the Jewish community. You've had the Archbishop of Canterbury, you've had leading Christian faith leaders, Hindu, Muslim, Sikhs, the whole lot. They've all been out there in support and solidarity. How did it get this bad in Britain?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How did it get so bad in Britain that we're at this situation? This is a country that fought against the atrocities at the Second World War. How do we get to the position where now Britain could well elect an anti-Semitic leader?
Well, I mean, the roots of modern anti-Semitism, you know, globally, even in this country, are obviously from the traditional far right, and all the tropes of Jewish power and illegitimacy and so on, unfortunately gaining currency, and those elements are there. But it's a threat from the far left, and we see that embodied in Corbyn and his supporters, which is the cutting edge of modern left-wing anti-Semitism, often disguised as a form of just anti-Zionism. And of course, in many formulations of that anti-Zionism, it's inherently anti-Semitic. And of course, there's jihadist anti-Semitism, Islamist strands of anti-Semitism, which are all too obvious. A combination of those, the failure to deal with them successfully over the years, the change of election of Labor Party leadership, which allowed in, you know, so many of these elements into the British Labor Party, which has changed its character. How do you reverse that? Because the real problem here is not only have the fringes come to the centre in the form of purveying this anti-Semitism, but the leadership sees in many ways it hasn't affected their popularity. And in fact, the people who are protesting are the ones more often than not who are being vilified. So we have a really entrenched and difficult problem here. And it's up to the mainstream leadership of society, be it British, Australian or anywhere else, to condemn this extremism, this bigotry and racism, and in this case in particular the anti-Semitism, and for society to fashion the mechanisms to deal with it.
Thanks for your time tonight, Colin Rubenstein. It can't go unchallenged. This is why we're highlighting it here tonight. Quick break, coming back. I've got a panel, discussion on the drought and a whole lot more.
You're watching Fredland on Sky News Live.